Roughly a quarter of the surface area of Amsterdam is covered in water. 165 canals run over 100 kilometers throughout the city, and more than 1,200 bridges make it walkable. Or bikeable. Most of it was built in the span of a single century, and its growth can be simplified into a couple specific stages. If you follow the Amstel River to the sea, just as you get to the canal belt, you will see an unnaturally straight stretch of river. This is the first man-made canal in the city, and it's the reason Amsterdam exists here. Dug in the 12th or 13th century, this canal was the solution to a problem that farmers in the region had been dealing with. The landscape they farmed was a low-lying, flat, marshy area made up of peat. To make the land suitable for farming, the water needed to be drained. But there was a problem. The land wasn't draining as fast as they needed it to. It was too far upstream from its outlet. But if they could connect it to a closer outlet, then it could drain much faster. So that's exactly what they did. Building this canal turned two rivers into one, the Amstel. And it solved their problem of drainage, but it also created a new problem. Now, when there was a storm surge, salty water could be pushed upriver and threaten the crops. And this leads us to modern-day Dam Square.
Okay, this place is called Dam Square, and it's called Dam Square because this used to be the dam in the River Amstel that gave Amsterdam its name, and it closed off the mouth of the River Amstel. But as you look around here now, you don't see any dam and you don't see any river. The canals have been filled in, and lots of new buildings have been created. And instead of boats, you see the trams and the cars and the bikes going over this place right now.
As unassuming as it may seem now, this dam was the foundation of the city. It could be opened to let the fresh water out and closed to prevent the salt water from coming in. But the creation of the dam had a bigger impact. Without it, the Amstel would have remained a minor river in a swampy delta. But with the canal and the dam, this was now a hub for trade.
The River Amstel was an inland connection where you could get to Rotterdam and Dordrecht, so you didn't have to sail the North Sea, which was a very dangerous place. So this was the crossing of a river and an important road. So this is the place where where the harbor of Amsterdam was created.
Literally, the beginning of the city goes back to controlling the water. When looking at the first section of the city, it becomes clear that the dam is at its center. From there, buildings were built on both sides of the river, and the city turned into an H shape. By the way, this map is oriented with north on the bottom and south on the top. As the city grew, they built two additional drainage canals on either side of the Amstel. And building on this swampy, soft soil was not easy. Because many of the structures of the medieval city were made of wood, and because there's been centuries of redevelopment since then, very few original buildings from this period exist. But this is one of them.
This is the Oude Kerk, the old church. And, well, as the name would have it, it's the old church. It's actually the oldest building we have left in Amsterdam.
And it rests on top of more than 2,000 wooden piles. These are massive tree trunks planted beneath the buildings to keep them from sinking into the soil. And this was common across the entire city. It's proven to be probably the best solution, but it's definitely not perfect.
The buildings are actually in place, but the rest of Amsterdam is sinking. So the streets have to be redone every few years, and they have to be heightened up every time.
So you can really see the height difference if you look over there and you see the people drinking a beer. They're literally on a different level.
It's kind of hard to overstate the impact that the Reformation had on Europe, not just directly, but also the chain of events that it caused. The Reformation sparked wars across Europe. Backed by the Pope, kings and emperors sent out armies to crush cities that opposed Catholic rule.
Antwerp fell into Spanish hands, and almost half of the population left the city. And Amsterdam took over as the main trade hub in the Netherlands and even in the Northwest Europe. So at that time, Amsterdam started to grow really fast, and new harbor areas were created, and they really had to be designed.
To accommodate this large influx of people, a new city wall was built further out, and the original one was torn down. This actually created an open space around that original city gate that we were looking at, which would now be used as a way station in the center of a city market, which is still referenced in the name of the area. On the east side of the city, a canal was added, and on the west side, a much more robust harbor. This harbor area is the perfect visual example on a map of what was about to happen to Amsterdam. The Dutch were going to take the naval strength they had and turn it into a global power.
If you look at the map, you can see that Amsterdam is sort of between the eastern parts of Europe, Finland to Denmark to Poland, and the southern parts, Spain. So Amsterdam is perfectly positioned in the middle, and there's a second nice position. You can see actually that Amsterdam is at the end of a huge European delta of rivers crisscrossing all the way through the continent.
By capitalizing on this position, Amsterdam ushered in the Dutch Golden Age. Amsterdam became the financial capital of the world, and it was under these circumstances that the modern stock exchange was born. It was during this era that the canal belt we know was created. As Amsterdam grew in global prominence, so did its risk of outside threat. Surrounded by Spain, England, and France, it became clear that fortifications and canals would need to be built to protect the city. The solution was drawn up under the city surveyor and the city engineer. The plan would double the size of Amsterdam. Streets and canals followed a carefully designed grid and arc pattern, adapted to the swampy terrain. But there was a risk. Would the city continue to grow in population at the same rate? What if they built all of this and no one came? So the solution was to do it in two parts.
It's almost like a windscreen wiper. You see the city expanding like a windscreen, and at one point it stops.
And within this plan, there are two distinct sections. The first is a series of canals. These were positioned at different distances from each other to create one row for the wealthiest canal houses with the largest garden areas, and another for the slightly less wealthy. These were very much intended to be separated from the rest of the expansion, the Jordaan. This area was for the lower class to keep their smelly, noisy work. But by the time they started building this, they had a problem. There had been so many immigrants moving to the city that many of them had just started building on random plots outside the city wall.
This turned into like a giant puzzle of people. They had to move around. So what they did was they created the canals next to the existing city, and many of the people who were already living there, they moved out into the agricultural land that was also urbanized. It was like a faubourg, an informally urbanized area. And they had to move out from the canal to make room for the canals. They moved them out into the Jordaan area. And then the structure of this Jordaan area couldn't be changed anymore because part of the building was already there. So it was already urbanized before it really became part of the city. And that is why you see these different structures on the map.
You can see that the angle and width of the roads in the Jordaan area perfectly match the farming pattern. This is a direct result of how fast the city was growing. By the time they built this, it was already fully populated. Population growth had slowed slightly, but it was still growing, and the Dutch were still expanding their colonies. So they decided to continue on with their plan, completing the full star-shaped bastion ring around the city. But just 10 years after it was finished being constructed, came what would be known as the Year of Disaster. A moment of attack from England and France that marked the end of the Golden Age. The population stopped growing, and urban development froze. Amsterdam's modern development has jumped the canal belt, but it was the Golden Age that forged the iconic foundation of the city.
In the 19th century, after 200 years of stagnation, everything started again with the creation of the North Sea Canal, which gave Amsterdam a new link to the North Sea and a new connection to the world for bigger ships. So that gave a big impulse to the harbor, and at the same time the Central Station was created, and they built Central Station on an artificial island in front of the harbor.
The construction of this Central Station really cut off the city from that harbor.
There were huge discussions concerning about the location of this station. So actually the Dutch government, not the Amsterdam government, took the decision to create the Central Station over there.
There have been many efforts over the years to make the city center more accessible.
They created a breakthrough street, the Raadhuisstraat, City Hall Street, which connects the now Palace on Dam Square, which used to be City Hall, to the new areas that were being developed beyond the city walls in the 19th century. So this street is from the 1880s. This is like quite a nice ensemble of 19th century building by the Van Gent architectural firm, which was one of the best, I think, in Amsterdam's 19th century architecture scene. Yeah.
But despite all of the changes and proposals, Amsterdam has still managed to keep its charm.
If you're on the canals, you never have a line of sight that goes on for too long. And that makes it feel cozy. Because if you compare that to a place like Paris, where they completely redesigned the city in the 19th century, and it's very clear that it's not tailored to a person, but it has a different idea. But Amsterdam is still very, very human.
And if you can't go walk physically through it, maybe now you can read it on its map.